On that stormy Thursday morning, the sky was falling over the city, but it wasn't the rain that weighed on William's shoulders. His footsteps echoed heavily on the soaked pavement as he held the small hand of his 6-year-old daughter, Sarah. The clock read 8:45 a.m., and his job interview, his last hope, was set to start in exactly 15 minutes. "Daddy, my shoe is wet," Sarah murmured, her brown curls sticking to her forehead from the drizzle. William swallowed hard, feeling the eviction notice pressing against his chest from inside the pocket of his only decent suit. 3 months behind on rent. 3 months since the company he had worked for over 8 years shut down without warning, taking his savings with it through unpaid benefits. That morning, the daycare had closed unexpectedly, just another sign that the universe seemed to conspire against him. He had no choice but to bring Sarah along. She was his entire world ever since Emma, his wife, lost her battle with cancer 2 years ago. His strength, yet at the same time, his greatest vulnerability. And that was when fate chose its moment to intervene. At the corner of Main Avenue, a black BMW sat with hazard lights flashing defiantly against the storm. Beside it, a woman in an elegant gray pantsuit struggled to change a flat tire. The rain intensified, and frustration was written all over her face. William hesitated. The clock now read 8:50 a.m. Just 5 minutes until the interview that could change their lives. His heart pounded, torn between self-preservation and compassion. "Daddy!" Sarah tugged at his sleeve, her green eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with concern. "That lady needs help." At that moment, William saw himself reflected in his daughter's eyes. What kind of example would he be setting if he ignored someone in need? What lesson would Sarah learn about humanity if he chose to just walk away? "Ma'am," he called out, approaching with Sarah. "Can I help?" The woman turned, revealing striking blue eyes and a look of sheer relief. "Thank God," she sighed. "I have a crucial meeting in 10 minutes, and this tire decided to give up at the worst possible moment." "I know the feeling," William replied, shrugging off his blazer and handing it to Sarah. "Sweetheart, hold this for Daddy." As he worked on the tire, the rain soaked through his white shirt. Sarah held a small umbrella over the woman, who introduced herself as Rachel, chatting enthusiastically about her collection of stuffed unicorns. 10 minutes later, the tire was changed, but William knew his job opportunity had washed away with the rain. And yet, a strange peace settled in his heart. Rachel's grateful smile and Sarah's proud expression were worth more than any interview. "I don't know how to thank you," Rachel said, rummaging through her purse. "Please, let me repay you." "That won't be necessary," William interrupted gently. "Just help someone else when you get the chance." Rachel watched as a father and daughter walked away in the rain, an image that would stay with her forever. What William didn't know was that his simple act of kindness had just altered the course of their lives in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. The week after missing his interview, William carried on with a quiet resignation. In their small apartment, he prepared breakfast for Sarah, turning the last slices of bread into a toast castle, a little daily magic to make his princess smile. Her laughter was his only comfort as he counted down the days until their inevitable eviction. His nights were filled with relentless job searches and whispered prayers after Sarah had fallen asleep. On his nightstand, a framed photo of Emma smiled back at him. Frozen in time. How would you handle all this? He wondered, running his fingers over glass. The silence of the night was his only answer. Sarah, with the sharp perception only children seem to have, understood more than he thought. One morning, he found her toys neatly arranged like a tiny store, each with a price tag written on scraps of paper. "We can sell them, Daddy," she said, her big eyes filled with innocence and love. "That way, you won't be sad about the bills anymore." William pulled her into a tight hug, swallowing the tears that threatened to fall. Then, on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was familiar. Rachel, the woman with the flat tire. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that surprised him. I'm the executive director of Phoenix Technologies, and I need to speak with you in person. Can you come to my office today? The mirrored skyscraper of Phoenix Technologies was intimidating, but William adjusted his borrowed tie and stepped inside, Sarah by his side. The daycare was closed again, this time for an unexpected renovation. In the luxurious reception area, Rachel awaited them with a welcoming smile that made the corporate space feel warmer. Your daughter told me about her unicorns that day, Rachel began, after settling Sarah in a cozy corner with paper and colored pencils. But what truly impressed me was your integrity. You chose to help, knowing it meant losing an important opportunity. William glanced at his daughter, watching as she focused on her drawing, unaware of the conversation that could change their lives. I couldn't teach her values if I didn't live by them myself, he answered simply. Rachel leaned forward, her blue eyes shining with determination. We need people like you at Phoenix. People who understand that business is about humans, not just numbers. I'd like to offer you a position on our project management team. William's heart stopped for a moment, but my resume. Resumes tell stories on paper. Rachel interrupted softly. Your actions told a much more meaningful one. She paused, glancing at Sarah. And there's more. Our company runs a scholarship program for employees' children. Sarah could study at Maple Grove, one of the city's best schools. Rachel's words hung in the air like a dream too fragile to believe. Sarah held up her drawing, a colorful umbrella sheltering 3 smiling figures from the rain. Somehow, in her simple colors, she had captured the complexity of that transformative moment. Why me? William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel smiled, and it wasn't just a professional gesture. It carried something deeper. Because in a world where everyone is looking out for themselves, you stop to help. And that, William, is more valuable than any degree or experience. In that office, while Sarah colored her dreams on paper, a new chapter was being written. The same fate that had once seemed so cruel was now revealing its gentler side through Rachel's blue eyes and the pure heart, a little girl who never stopped believing in kindness. The following months brought a quiet transformation to William and Sarah's lives. His new job at Phoenix Technologies provided more than just financial stability. It restored his dignity. Sarah flourished at Maple Grove, her notebooks filled with golden stars and stories of new friends. The nights of worry were replaced by simple dinners filled with laughter and tales of their day. Rachel had become a constant presence in their lives. It started with casual lunches at work, evolving into weekend visits and park outings with Sarah. William noticed how his daughter lit up in Rachel's presence, as if an empty space in their hearts was slowly being filled again. One Saturday afternoon, while Sarah played on the swings, Rachel shared a part of her past. I lost my parents very young, she said, watching the children run around. I was raised by my grandmother, who taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, about care. Her words carried the weight of old wounds and the lightness of someone who had found peace despite them. William felt something growing between them, something delicate and terrifying. Since Emma, his heart had remained closed, shielding itself from the possibility of loss. But Rachel had a way of slipping past his defenses without ever forcing them. And that was when the past chose to return. A letter arrived at William's office, the official seal of his former employer glaring at him. The company had been acquired by a large conglomerate, and an audit had uncovered serious irregularities. His name appeared on documents he had never signed, tying him to an embezzlement scheme that had taken place months before the company went under. This is impossible, William murmured, his hands shaking as he held the summons to testify. Everything he had rebuilt seemed to be crumbling beneath him again. How would he explain this to Rachel? To Phoenix's board? How would he protect Sarah from this new storm? That night, after tucking Sarah into bed, William sat in his small living room, the letter heavy in his hands like lead. The soft sound of knocking startled him. Rachel stood at his door, her eyes filled with an understanding that told him she already knew everything. The notice reached our legal department today. she said, stepping inside and sitting next to him. "William, I need you to be completely honest with me." He told her everything. His responsibilities at the old company, the reports he signed, the people he worked with. His voice wavered as he described the day the company shut down, leaving hundreds of employees without pay or benefits. Rachel listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. "I believe you," she finally said, taking his hands in hers. "But you need to understand, this could affect your position at Phoenix. The board will likely demand a suspension during the investigation." The words hit him like a punch. The world he had just rebuilt threatened to collapse again. "Sarah," he whispered, her name carrying all his fear. Rachel squeezed his hands tighter. "You're not alone in this," she said, her voice both firm and gentle. "I'm hiring the best lawyers. We will prove your innocence." William felt the tears he had been holding back begin to fall. "Why would you do this for us?" "Because when you stopped in that rain to help me, you showed me who you really are," Rachel replied, her voice filling the quiet night. "And now it's my turn to do the same for you." In the next room, Sarah slept peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering outside. But in that small living room, two souls, scarred by life, found strength in each other, preparing to face the difficult days ahead. The days of William's suspension from Phoenix felt heavier than lead. In their modest apartment, now decorated with Sarah's colorful drawings on the fridge, he combed through piles of old documents, desperately searching for anything that could prove his innocence. Nights blurred into dawns as he lost himself in memories of his past career, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when everything had started to crumble. Sarah, with her keen intuition, sensed the subtle changes in her father. His hugs lasted longer. His smiles carried a sadness she couldn't quite understand. One morning, she placed her favorite stuffed unicorn, the one Rachel had given her, on his desk. "For you," she said softly, "to keep the bad dreams away." Rachel had become his pillar of strength during this storm. She visited often, bringing not only emotional support, but also updates on the investigation. The legal team she had hired was unraveling a tangled web of forgeries and financial manipulations, revealing a scheme far more elaborate than William had ever imagined. "We found something," Rachel said one rainy evening, eerily similar to the day they first met. Sarah had already fallen asleep, and the apartment was silent except for the steady drumming of rain against the windows. "Thomas Anderson, your former supervisor, has been forging signatures for years. Not just yours, many employees." William's heart pounded. Thomas had been his mentor, someone he trusted blindly. "How did I not see this?" he murmured, more to himself than to Rachel. Rachel moved closer, taking his hands in hers. "Sometimes we trust so much that we become blind to the obvious," she said gently. "But now we need to be stronger than ever. Phoenix's board is pushing for a quick decision about your future with the company." At the mention of Phoenix, William tensed. "I can't lose this job, Rachel. I can't let Sarah go through all that again." His voice shook as he remembered the days of desperation, the overdue bills, the constant fear of eviction. "You won't lose anything," Rachel assured him, her conviction steady and warm. "But I need you to trust me completely. There's something I haven't told you about Thomas Anderson." William watched as Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a worn folder. Inside were old photographs, yellow documents. "Thomas worked with my father 20 years ago," she revealed, her voice laced with suppressed emotion. "He was the one who orchestrated my father's company's downfall, using the same tactics. My father couldn't bear the shame. He took his own life before the truth could come out." Her words hung in the air like falling autumn leaves, heavy with pain and meaning. William now understood. This fight wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about justice. It was about making sure no other families were destroyed by the greed of unscrupulous men. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked softly, realizing how difficult it must have been for her to reopen these wounds. "Because I needed to be sure," Rachel replied, silent tears slipping down her face. sure that you were different, that you weren't involved. And every day I spent with you, watching how you treat Sarah, how you care about the people around you, only confirmed what my heart already knew since that morning in the rain. At that moment, William did something he hadn't planned. He pulled Rachel into a hug, feeling how perfectly she fit against him, as if the universe had been weaving their paths together from the very start. The soft scent of her perfume mixed with the fresh rain drifting through the open window, creating a fragrance that would stay with him forever. "We'll fight this together," he whispered into her hair. "For Sarah, for your father, for us." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside that small apartment, two wounded hearts were healing, finding strength in each other, preparing for the battle ahead. At the bedroom door, Sarah watched silently, a small smile on her lips, as if she already understood that her family was, at last, becoming whole. The morning of preliminary hearing arrived beneath a sky heavy with dark clouds. William adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his hands trembling slightly as Sarah stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed unicorn tightly against her chest. Rachel was due to arrive any moment to take them to the courthouse. "Will everything be okay, Daddy?" Sarah asked, her small voice carrying a worry far beyond her years. William knelt before her, gently fixing the ribbon in her hair. "Yes, my love. Sometimes we have to face a storm to see the rainbow, remember? Just like Mommy always said." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Rachel stood there in a navy blue suit, looking stunning. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet tension she hadn't shown before. "William, we need to talk before we leave." "Sarah, sweetheart, can you wait in the living room for just a moment?" Inside the bedroom, Rachel closed the door softly behind her. "We found something late last night," she began, her voice low and intense. Thomas Anderson wasn't acting alone. There was someone above him, someone pulling all the strings. William felt his stomach twist. "Who?" "Richard Bennett," Rachel said, watching his reaction closely. "The current chairman of Phoenix's board." The name hit William like a physical blow. Richard Bennett, the man who had approved his hiring, who had always treated him with a special kind of consideration in the company's hallways. "How?" "He's been secretly buying out failing companies for years," Rachel continued, her words heavy with the gravity of the revelation. "Companies that he helped bankrupt through schemes just like the one that ruined your former employer. Phoenix was supposed to be his next target." William sank onto the edge of the bed, the weight of the situation crashing over him in waves. "That's why he supported my hiring so much. I was the perfect scapegoat if anything went wrong." "Yes," Rachel confirmed, sitting beside him. "But he made one mistake. He didn't count on the fact that I would fall in love with you, that I would fight with everything I have to prove your innocence." Her voice trembled slightly with the confession. William's heart pounded, not from fear, but from something else. But before he could respond, a new worry surfaced. "Bennett is too powerful. If he finds out that we know—" "He already knows," Rachel interrupted, her hands finding his. "This morning I got a call. He made an offer. If you agree to take the blame for everything, you'll get a generous settlement. Enough money to give Sarah a comfortable life, a top-tier education." William felt the air leave his lungs. The temptation was real. Sarah's security had always been his greatest concern. But then he thought of her face, the lessons he had fought to teach her. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Rachel squeezed his hand tighter. "I have one last card to play. Years ago, when I lost my father, I kept every document I found in his office. Among them, there's evidence that ties Bennett to other fraud cases. I never used it because I was scared. I was alone. But now we're not alone," William finished, understanding the weight of the choice ahead. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah entered, holding something in her hands, the framed photo of Emma that sat on a nightstand. "Mommy always said that truth is like stars," she said, handing the picture to her father. Even when we can't see them, they're still there. William looked at Emma's smiling face in the photograph, then at Sarah's innocent yet wise eyes, and finally at Rachel, the woman who had risked everything to stand by his side. At that moment, he knew exactly what they had to do. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, reminding him of the day it all began. But this time, the storm didn't bring fear. It carried the promise of justice, of renewal. It was time to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone Bennett had hurt over the years. William stood, grabbing his folder. "We do this the right way," he said. "For the truth, for justice, for all of us." The courthouse exuded an intimidating solemnity as William, Rachel, and Sarah walked through its marble corridors. Sarah held tightly onto her father's hand, as if trying to channel all her courage into that touch. Rachel walked beside them, her presence a silent source of strength. Inside the courtroom, Thomas Anderson was already seated, his face pale and drawn. His eyes met William's for a brief moment before he quickly looked away. Beside him sat Richard Bennett, his polished demeanor intact, his fingers drumming lightly against a mahogany table. "Last chance," Bennett murmured as William passed by. "Think of your daughter." William gripped Sarah's hand tighter, remembering her words about truth and stars. Rachel gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before taking her seat, placing an old, worn folder on the table, the document she had held onto for years, waiting for this moment. The hearing began with the formal charges. William listened as the prosecutor outlined the alleged crimes he had never committed, feeling the weight of every accusation. Sarah sat in the front row, under the watchful eye of a kind social worker Rachel had arranged. Her wide, innocent eyes never left her father, as if she believed that just by watching, she could protect him. Then came the moment that changed everything. Rachel stood, her voice clear and unwavering as it filled the courtroom. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I would like to submit evidence that not only proves Mr. Williams' innocence, but also exposes a much larger corporate fraud scheme." Bennett's confident mask slipped. Thomas Anderson began to sweat visibly. Rachel opened her father's folder, revealing 2 decades worth of carefully documented secrets. "These documents show a pattern," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of her own history. "A pattern that began 20 years ago with my father's company and has continued to this day. Mr. Bennett is not just an observer in this case. He is the mastermind behind dozens of similar corporate frauds." The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Bennett shot to his feet, his face twisting with rage. "This is absurd. This woman is clearly emotionally involved with the accused. Her evidence is unreliable." Then, in an unexpected twist, Thomas Anderson did something no one anticipated. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his hands trembling. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice broken. "Mr. Bennett orchestrated everything. He instructed me to forge the signatures, to create the falsified documents. William knew nothing." In the front row, Sarah smiled at her father, tears of relief shining in her eyes. William felt his heart expand with gratitude for his daughter, for Rachel, for the truth finally coming to light. Bennett turned toward the exit, only to be blocked by court officers. His empire of lies was collapsing around him. Rachel's evidence, combined with Thomas's confession, painted an irrefutable picture of decades of fraud and deception. "Daddy," Sarah called out, running into William's arms as soon as the judge adjourned the session. "You fought for the truth, just like the stars." Rachel joined them, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. William pulled her into a tight embrace, their small family forming a perfect circle of love and truth. From a defendant's table, Bennett watched the scene unfold, finally realizing that all his wealth and power could never buy what they had. "It's over," Rachel whispered, the weight of 20 years of waiting for justice finally lifting from her shoulders. "It's finally over." William looked at the 2 people who had changed his life forever, his daughter, who had never stopped believing in him, and Rachel, who had risked everything for the truth. Outside, the sun broke through the heavy clouds, its golden light streaming to the tall courthouse windows, as if the universe itself was celebrating their redemption. A year had passed since that day in court. The small house that William, Sarah, and Rachel now called home had a blooming garden, where stuffed unicorns often attended imaginary tea parties on sunny afternoons. The once empty walls were now filled with photographs, captured moments of happiness, built on truth and love. Sarah had blossomed in ways that continued to surprise them. Her grades at Maple Grove remained excellent, but what stood out most was her generous heart. Every Thursday, she set aside part of her allowance to buy flowers for her teacher. Because kindness creates more kindness, she explained, repeating the very words her father had taught her that rainy morning so long ago. Rachel had stepped into the role of Phoenix Technology's new president after Bennett's conviction. Under her leadership, the company established a financial aid fund for employees facing hardship, inspired by William's story. As for Thomas Anderson, after serving a reduced sentence for his cooperation, he found redemption working on social projects, helping families who had suffered from corporate fraud. One particularly special spring afternoon, William took Rachel and Sarah to the cemetery where Emma rested. The place, once a space filled with sorrow, now held a peacefulness that felt different. Sarah gently placed fresh daisies on the grave, while Rachel held William's hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Mommy would be happy to see our family now," Sarah said softly, tracing the golden letters of Emma's name on the marble. She always said that true love comes in many forms. William looked at his daughter, so wise in her innocence, and then at Rachel, the woman who had brought light back into their lives. "Yes, my love," he answered. "And sometimes that love comes disguised as a flat tire on a rainy morning." Rachel smiled, silent tears rolling down her face. The following week, they would return to that same spot for a special moment. Their wedding would be an intimate celebration, with Emma as their spiritual witness. Rachel's engagement ring had been crafted from the gold of Emma's old wedding band, an idea from Sarah, symbolizing the blending of past and present into a perfect circle of love. Back at their home, while Sarah played with her newest unicorn, a purple one with silver wings, William and Rachel sat together on the porch swing. The sky hinted at rain, but dark clouds no longer frightened them. "You know what amazes me most?" Rachel asked, lacing her fingers with his. "How a decision made in mere seconds can change an entire life. You could have walked past me that morning." William pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "It wasn't a decision," he whispered. "It was my heart finding its way back home." Sarah suddenly ran up to them, her green eyes sparkling with the unique wisdom of children who understand the true meaning of love. "Look," she pointed to the sky. A rainbow had begun to form through the thinning clouds. "Mommy stars are smiling at us, even in the daytime." The three of them embraced, forming their own constellation of love and hope. The rain began to fall gently, but they remained there, wrapped in the warmth of their shared love. Because sometimes the greatest blessings in life arrive disguised as challenges, and the happiest endings begin with a simple act of kindness. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Your words are the strength that inspires us to keep bringing stories that move and transform. If you felt connected to William, Rachel, and little Sarah, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can continue spreading messages of love, hope, and kindness. Until the next story.